Hello, all you happy crumpin' wargamers out there. I am your host, Jonathan Arkin, and today I am bringing you the highly anticipated Adeptus Custodes deep dive on the tactical walkthrough. The Adeptus Custodes are my probably primary army, although I am leaning more into orcs right now. I am currently ranked number 2 in Scandinavia, number 30 or so in Europe, and a whopping very non-impressive 70 in the world. To be fair, I have been only using the Golden Boys for approximately 6 months. I do love them, and right now, today, I am going to reveal all of the tips and tricks of how they operate. If you're a new Adeptus Custodes player, you're gonna love this. If you are a veteran, you're gonna pick up some things that you may have missed. And if you are just looking to learn how to fight against the Adeptus Custodes, you are absolutely gonna love this because I'm gonna teach you how to beat us. If you enjoy this content, please show your support by dropping me a like, hitting the subscribe button, as a lot more of this stuff will be coming out to you. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, criticisms, please type them into the comment section, and I do actually respond to all comments. So thanks all for your support. Let us get into it. What is going to be included in today's lecture? So we are going to be talking about army-specific rules. These are going to be primarily the karate or the martial katas, as people talk about, how they apply, how to utilize them. Then we're going to talk about all of our character combos, which is always a super important part of the codex. We'll talk about units, unit strategies, unit stratagems, units combinations. We'll be talking about playstyle. How do the Custodes actually work on the battlefield? And what is the stratagem interaction? And how do we play against these guys? Now, this is going to be a very in-depth video, so this will be actually broken up into two parts. The first part will be including all of Army special rules, warlord traits, relics, character combinations, and the second part will be when I'm walking through individual units, and then I'm going to actually demonstrate strategy of how to actually tackle the matchup quite a bit. So the first part you could say is really the rules and all the little tips and tricks with the rules, and the second half is going to be the more of the units and talking in depth about some other things, some other goodies on how to actually play against the army and whatnot. Let's pop into it. So first off, what are the Adeptus Custodes boons? What makes these guys tick? What makes them freaking awesome? Well, they've got a couple amazing things going for them. First of all of their infantry is elite infantry. So if you hate playing against a lot of Terminators and things, well, you're going to hate playing against the Custodes because they're all Terminators and they all have higher toughness and strength. So all of our infantry is going to be strength 5, T5, right off the bat. And they're going to have a 2-up armor save and a 4-up invuln. That's just the entire army, except for like 1 or 2 units. When I'm referring to the entire army, right now I'm only talking about the Adeptus Custodes. I will talk about the Sisters of Silence in this video as well, but when I'm generalizing, I'm talking about the Adeptus Custodes portion of the army. Okay, so they also have a 6-up Feel No Pain against mortals. As you'll see, one of the shield hosts, hint, hint, one of the better ones, will actually even get a 4-up Feel No Pain against mortal wounds. All of our core infantry is going to be OBSEC, and turns out that's all the infantry except for the characters. So the characters are not OBSEC, the infantry are. This is newer to Arcs of Omens, and it was like this in Nakamen for a little while, and the Nephilim took it out, and it makes Custodes very, very dangerous because, in addition to that, all models, this includes our dreadnoughts, count as 2 models for holding objectives. So a 3-man unit of Custodian Guard count as 6 men OBSEC. So they are actually really, really good at holding objectives, and that's a real powerhouse for the Adeptus Custodes. They have supreme middle to short range damage control. All of their weapons are going to be like rapid fire 24 inches or within 24 inches, with the exception of a very few, which we will talk about. But the Custodes' ability to dominate the battlefield really starts and ends at that middle to short range. So they love close range combat because they're extremely powerful at it, and they love that middle range because they all have these rapid fire weapons or things like that. Even their anti-tank weapons are going to be within that 24-inch range. So they are a middle to short range army. Now, they have fantastic stratagems. They probably have some of the best stratagems in the entire game. And this is just freaking true. As a matter of fact, the main way they were nerfed previously was we took a lot of the really good stratagems and just said, you can only use them once per game. Well, that was rolled back in Arcs of the Omen, so we can spam our stratagems again. This makes the Custodes super powerful, and we'll be talking in depth about the stratagems. Then we have dominant character support. The Adeptus Custodes characters are brutal. Maybe the only better characters in the game, stronger characters in the game, would be like orc characters. but not really. I mean, custodian characters are beast mode. Um, for example, you can give them 2 warlord traits, similar to how sometimes you can in whatever we call them, Space Marines, the wannabe Custodes, but way better. And then we also have exceptionally reliable roles, especially in damage support or damage output. So Custodes are always hitting on 2s, and they're always wounding on pretty good, and they all have phenomenal armor. So they hit like a truck. They're super tough to kill. The problem is, go to the next slide, going to be the fact that, well, they have a few of them. So first off, they do not have good horde clearing, especially at range. So the only anti-horde weapon they have is a hurricane bolter, which can go on their bikes, which typically speaking, you won't see that because as we'll learn in video part 2 of this, our bikes have better weapons than the hurricane bolters to take. So they're not great at clearing hordes at range. They're pretty decent at it in melee. They do have very limited anti-tank, actually. Their bikes are probably their best anti-tank because they all have what's called a salvo launcher, which is going to be a strength 8 AP4 D3 plus 3 damage weapon. But if you're a tank that also happens to have, like, say, an invuln save, they do struggle into the tank matchup. They have some tricks to make up for it, though, so don't think that they're weak into the tank matchups. As a matter of fact, the Custodes generally crush the Knights matchups, so they do have some ability to play with it. It is very difficult for Custodes to screen the enemy, however, because they have very low model caps. I think my competitive army right now runs 26 models, which is a far cry different from the 150-ish that's in my work army. But yeah, it's very difficult for them to screen the enemy. The Custodes have 0, count them, 0 throwaway units. They don't trade well. What they have to do is they just have to overwhelm and not die, which they're really good at doing, but they can't trade particularly well. In Custodes, you're not going to throw a unit to kill another unit and then just get killed by the enemy in turn. They also have a fairly weak secondary game, with the advent of Arcs of Omen behind enemy lines being one of the best secondaries in the game. That was really good for Custodes. And they also play, say, like banners really well, but their private secondaries or their faction unique secondaries kind of suck mostly, and we'll talk about those really in depth later on. And then every unit in the army is going to be very significant to the game plan. A basic Custodian Guardian with a shield is 2% of the entire army. One model counts as 2% of the army because their basic soldier is like 50 freaking points. So they do have weaknesses, and we will learn how to exploit them. And if you are a Custodes player, we'll learn how to not get exploited. So, Sisters of Silence. These ladies are fantastic additions to the Custodes army, and they do actually provide quite a lot of support. Originally, people overlooked them, but I am here to tell you these girls are awesome. So you can have 1 unit of Sisters of Silence per troops of Adeptus Custodes. So typically you're not running many of these. As a matter of fact, I only take 1 in my army, but I do take them. They provide an 18-inch bubble of -1 to cast psychic abilities. This stacks 3 times. So if you have 3 units, all enemies are going to be -3 to cast within 18 inches. This can be very, very powerful. They also cannot be targeted by psychic abilities. This is because they're all blanks, meaning they have no soul, and no psychic presence in the warp. So they can't be targeted by psychic abilities. I'll tell you this right now. This saved my butt when I was playing against Flamers and Thousand Suns span, because the Thousand Suns, whenever they wanted to do their horrifying psychic phase, I would just run the Sisters in front and basically eliminate an entire psychic phase from the Thousand Suns. Of course, they would die in the shooting phase afterwards, but that basically eliminated an entire psychic phase for them. So they're really good for screening those smites, because they can't be targeted by smite, and smite has to go to the closest visible target. So they're very useful. And they're also relatively cheap as far as the Custodes are concerned. You can get a unit of Prosecutors for 55 points, which is literally 5 points more than a normal Custodian Guard. Just one, not a unit of, just one of them. So they can be relatively cheap, and they can help with objective holding and stuff. They also have access to some very interesting stratagems. We'll talk about the stratagems in depth in a little bit, but just a little preview. They can auto-deny on a 4-up. They can make you double perils of the warp. They can do some really cool things. So we like the Sisters. All right. Let's start talking about the Army Special Mechanic. This is the martial Katahs, or the karate, as I am very fond of saying. This is the Custodes, our version of combat doctrines. And there's a bunch of those different ones. A couple things to note is only your Adeptus Custodes get access to the Katahs. Vehicles, sadly, do not know karate. Unfortunately, our dreadnoughts just they don't have their black belts yet, so they don't get to benefit from the Katahs. But all the normal Custodes do. Your Sisters of Silence do not. All right. At the end of your deployment, but before the first turn is decided, so you get to see where your enemy is deployed, but before the first turn is decided, you will select 3 of your 6 Katahs, and you will place them face down on the table. You do not have to tell your opponent what they are, but you have to place them in order. It's kind of similar to the way that the Necron command protocol, maybe that's what it's called. Sorry, the Necron protocols work. So you just select them before the game starts, and this is after deployment, before the first turn begins, and you'll just reveal them as they go up. Now, there are ways to change the orders of those, as we will see, but you want to try to place it in the order that you want them to be in. And each Katah is going to have 2 stances. Now, one stance is selected at a time. So, for example, it's first turn. In your command phase, you reveal which Katah you're in, and then you'll say, I'm going to be in stance 1. Then in your second player turn, you can decide to go into stance 2 of that same Katah, or you can move on to a new Katah. If you move on, you can never go backwards. So that does mean that if you just want to play one stance of 3 different Katahs, you can play turn 4 and 5 of the game with no Katah active. So just be aware of that. Now, each shield host, which is our sub-factions, will also have a special Katah where they get both stances active. And we'll talk about that pretty dang soon, as a matter of fact, now. So what are these magical Katahs? Well, the first one is going to be Callistus. Callistus is paired with the Solar Watch shield host, and we'll talk about the shield host in a little bit too. But Callistus is going to give you the ability, for stance 1, to roll 2d6s for your advances, dropping the lowest. This can be nice. Stance 2 is counting as remaining stationary in the shooting phase. This also can be very powerful, especially when you consider that your Custodes bikes auto-advance 6 inches, which means they could advance 20 inches and then shoot 24 inches with their basically Dark Lance equivalents. Then we're going to have, and so when I say Solar Watch, what that means is that Solar Watch, they can have both of those active in the same turn, versus everyone else would only get to choose one. Then you have Conservi, and this is the preferred Katah of the Emissaries Imperiatus. Number 1 is going to be Perform an Action if you advance or fall back. This is one that I take basically every game, because as Custodes, we're essentially always going to want to play Raise the Banners. So if you can be in advance and do an action turn 1, you can get your infantry basically to any objective in No Man's Land, and you can still raise that banner. And that's really powerful. We really need that. And then number 2 is going to perform an action and still shoot. And sometimes this can be useful as well. So I do think Conservi is a very good Katah. Then we go to Dakatari. Dakatari, stance 1, subtract 2 inches, count them, 2 inches from pile-in and consolidations for your enemy. Oh my goodness. Is this underutilized, but incredible. Let's say your opponent makes a long bomb charge, and they're like, oh, this is great. I'm going to be able to pile in my 3 inches and get everyone to fight. No. You make a long bomb charge, and suddenly you're only fighting with 2 models in your unit of 10 Terminators, because you only get 1 inch for your pile-in consolidate. That can be devastating to the enemy if you plan it correct. This is the preferred stance of the Dread Host. And on the second stance, you're going to get to choose to add 1 to your attack profile, but your damage changes to 1. So most of Custodes, basically all their damage is all damage 2. There's very little damage 1 in the Codex. So this is something that helps with horde clearing, but I tend to find this stance kind of sucks, so I generally don't use it. I would use it if I was against Death Guard, since they're already -1, but typically speaking, stance 2 of Dakatari is leave it or take it. Now, for the second part of the Katahs, because there's 6 of them, remember, you have Salvus, and Salvus is the preferred stance of the Aquilan Shield. So their stance 1 is add 4 inches to the range of weapons. This is cool. This can increase your threat range fairly significantly at times. Then number 2, stance 2, is infantry get to shoot twice with auric weapons. It's not as good as it sounds. Trust me, if it was, everyone would be taking it. But auric weapons only really apply to the axes, the spears, and the swords, which we will talk about when we get to our unit profiles of your normal soldiers. So things like our Sagittarium, which are the Custode guys with the heavy bolters that are assault, they don't get to shoot twice. It only applies to the basic weapons for the basic troops. Rendax, this is potentially one of the best of the Katah stances. Stance 1, hit rolls of 6s, auto wound vehicles and monsters. Wow, this is strong. This is one of the reasons why vehicles go bye-bye. So while Custodes do not have much anti-tank, They do, however, have an ability to handle vehicles still. So even Custodes have a ton of lower strength, strength 5, strength 4, AP 1, damage 2 shots. If they're auto wounding you on 6s to hit, and it's very easy to give Custodes rerolls to hit, that can be very, very challenging for a vehicle heavy list to handle. Then the second stance of that is going to be add 1 to the strength if you charge a hero or intervene into a vehicle or monster. Also, very useful at times. Not always, but very, very useful. So if you're playing against a vehicle heavy list or a monster heavy list, you're 100% taking my decks. Katahs. Katahs is my favorite stance, most likely because it goes along with my favorite shield host, which is the Shadow Keepers. And I am not ashamed of being biased there at all. So stance 1, no rerolls to hit in melee. This stance by itself is why, man, it is difficult for Custodes who plan on it to lose to Sisters of Battle. I feel kind of bad, but I've never lost a game against Sisters of Battle since I've been playing Custodes. That's not true. My very first game with Custodes, I lost. That was the first time I ever played with them. Outside of that, I haven't lost to Sisters of Battle. To Bloody Road specifically. I did lose one match earlier this year at a big tournament to Artist Shroud. That guy just outplayed me. Jerk. He wasn't a jerk. He was a really sweet guy. But anyway, so primarily melee armies. So when we're talking about our Cults of Creations of Bile from last season, or Bloody Rose, when we're talking about literally anyone, with the exception of World Eaters, there's no reroll to hit melee. Basically just is incredible for. Then if you're going to win a roll, then for the stance 2 of Katahs, your opponent, you have to win a roll-off with your opponent, and they cannot fall back from your infantry. So if you are engaged in infantry with a really big, nasty tank, they can't actually fall back from you unless they win on a roll-off, which is extremely powerful. So you can lock your opponent into combat with this, where they're not re-rolling hits in melee. Character support. This is the shining star of the Adeptus Custodes Codex. Their characters are incredible. And we're going to start with the most incredible, the Giga Chad himself, Trajan Valoris. All right, this guy. Let me tell you about this guy. He has an aura of reroll 1s to hit and to wound. This will stack onto Dreadnoughts. This will stack onto your infantry, onto your bikes, onto everything. Just reroll 1s to hit and wound for everyone within 6 inches of him. Remember, there's not that many models in the Custodes army. It's easy to do a castle where he just provides that to literally everything in your army. Then, he himself is a total beat stick in melee. He's going to have 6 attacks at strength 10, count on strength 10, AP 3, damage 3. He gets to full reroll his own hits if you take his Warlord trait, which you will. Because he gives you a free CP when you take him, which means the 2 Warlord traits he gets are free, essentially. So he rerolls his own hit rolls. And he hits on 2s, obviously. He's a Custode. He has a 5-up CP regen when you spend CP. So every time you spend CP, which you will be spending a lot as a Custodes player, on a 5-up you get to regen 1 per battle round. This is very powerful because you need your CP as a Custodes player. He has a 6-inch, count it, 6-inch heroic intervention. It is very challenging to stay out of his heroic intervention range because this guy can just get into combat. Those heroic interventions are really strong for getting your Custodes army up the battlefield too. Because remember, on a heroic intervention, you don't have to end your movement engaged in close combat. You just have to end your movement closer to the enemy, closer to the closest enemy. So that's really strong for just giving yourself free movement. He can reorder your Katahs. So let's say that it is your go turn and you really need to be auto-winning vehicles on 6s to hit. But unfortunately, you made your Katahs in the wrong order and you're in the wrong stance. Don't worry. Mr. Trajan Valoris will just let you flip it. Now you're in red decks, and you get to auto-win your vehicles in 6s. It's really freaking awesome. It's so powerful. It's the main reason why I really don't even pay that much attention to when I'm selecting my Katahs, what order I'm putting them in, because he's going to let me reorder them once per game when I need to anyway. Now, his Moment Shackle. This is the Rage Quit button. He's got a million rules, I know. So the Moment Shackle. Once per game, Trajan Valoris gets to do one of 3 things. He can turn a damage roll to a 0 that targeted him. So you accidentally left him out in the open, and a Tau Railgun says, now's my chance, shoots him, and deals 9 wounds to him. Actually, that was 0 damage. You'll still take the mortal wounds, but it would be 0 damage from the damage, which is pretty freaking cool. Then, if he chooses not to use that, he could fight twice at the end of the fight phase. He could fight again at the end of the fight phase. This is extremely powerful let's say he runs into a unit of Terminators and he kills 2 of them and there's 3 left and they strike back and they fail to kill him. Well, he can just fight again, kill 2 or 3 more. This is so powerful for getting him those really, really important battles where you just didn't get that wound that you needed to get in. It's so strong and it makes him able to just annihilate enemies. And then he also, if he chooses not to fight twice, or he chooses not to turn the damage to 0, he can combat interrupt. Wow. As you'll see, Custodes have the ability to really dominate the combat phase because they have a lot of tips and tricks, but this gets you a way to get a free interrupt, which is very, very powerful. I got to be honest with you, I've only used it maybe twice, but it was very important both the times I used it. Typically, I'm going to use the fight twice, or every now and then I will turn a damage roll to a 0. All right, this guy, Shield Captain on Dawn Eagle Jet Bike. So everything we just said about Trajan Valorous being a Chad, oh my gosh, it applies to this guy. In my army, my shield captain, his name is Indominus Rex because he cannot be killed. He is such a jerk, and he just ruins people's dreams. So this guy's a beast. He has a 14-inch movement. He has a captain's aura, so he provides reroll 1s to hit. And he's got a bunch of different upgrades. I can pretty much guarantee you're always going to spend a few extra points to give him an upgrade called Tip of the Spear. What this does is it lets him reroll 1s to hit and wound on turns where he charges or heroic intervenes. Pretty dang amazing because he's going to have 6 attacks going in at strength 7, and he gets to be +1 to wound when he charges or heroic intervenes. So he's normally going to be winning things on 2s, hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s. Oh, it's madness. AP 3, damage 2. He's so powerful. There's another upgrade you could give him instead of Tip of the Spear. I think it's called the Ceaseless Hunter. That will allow him to always fall back and charge, which is also pretty dang useful. Typically, you're going to give him 2 warlord traits. You don't have to, but typically you'll give him 2 warlord traits. The 2 that he normally is going to be taking, one is going to be Superior Creation, which gives him a 5-up Feel No Pain. And the second one that I use is the Radiant Mantle. People argue with me on this. I disagree with all of them, and I'm correct. Radiant Mantle makes him always -1 to be hit. This makes him very hard to kill. For ranged options, this guy can take a Hurricane Bolter or a Salvo Launcher. I've actually recently been taking the Hurricane Bolter on him because I find that he typically only shoots once a game, even though I put the rest of my bikes with these Salvo Launchers. For him, I tend to give him the Hurricane Bolter, but that's up to everyone. Now, his build is actually fairly flexible based off of which shield host you're in. So, for example, if you're in Shadow Keepers, which is the shield host I play, he does have a fairly significantly different build than he might in some of the other ones. And we'll get into those combinations as we go through the shield host. But this guy is a complete Chad, and he will ruin people's days. The Captain and Alaris Terminator Armor. The Alaris Terminator Armor is pretty interesting because it doesn't really seem to do very much for Custodes in general. It gives you 1 wound and 1 attack. It doesn't give any bonus toughness or any bonus armor or anything like that, but it's still cool. This guy's really amazing for one specific relic, and that relic is going to be the Praetorian Plate. Let me tell you about the Praetorian Plate. The Praetorian Plate allows him to basically do a heroic intervention anywhere on the entire table. The only rules is, he could teleport 40 inches if he wants. The only rule is that he has to end his teleport within 3 inches of a friendly unit. And he can fight when he does this heroic intervention. This is so powerful for allowing you to get behind enemy lines. It is extremely powerful for providing you with the ability to swing a very important key combat. It's amazing for getting an extra body onto an objective. This is so flexible and it's really powerful. I don't really use him very often, but his usage is incredible. And if you're going against this guy, you need to know that he can just show up anywhere that's where there's a combat. And if you are planning on using him, know that he is amazing for objective control. He's amazing for swinging a close combat. And he's also amazing for scoring that behind enemy lines that you may probably desperately need. So I like him a lot. He's normally going to have an upgrade with him that gives him +1 to wound monsters and vehicles. And he's probably also, or he may have an upgrade that allows him to end his pile-in, or end his heroic interventions of pile-ins into anyone, not just the closest enemy model. So very powerful guy, has a lot of utility. Then we have the Blade Champion, or the Blade Wizard, as he is ought to know. This guy. This is my second favorite thing in the entire game. My first favorite thing being the Beast Boss on Squigosaur for the works, but this is my second favorite thing in the game. He is, I believe, the best trading piece in the entire game of Warhammer 40,000. Let me tell you about this legend, this paragon of man. He is trans hitman in melee, meaning you can only hit him on 4-ups in melee. He fights first, which is really strong. He has 3 different attack profiles. 6 attack space. One of these profiles will auto wound vehicles and monsters on a 4 up to hit. Not 6s, a 4 up to hit. Just auto wound vehicles and monsters. And then it's going to be at AP 4 damage 2. That one's going to be at strength 6. Then he's got another attack profile, which provides him with reroll wounds against characters. It's going to be at strength 7, AP 4, damage 3. So he has a damage 2 profile that can just auto wound vehicles and monsters, and he has a damage 3 profile that can go into anything, but it's specifically good against characters because it lets you reroll wound rolls against them. And then he has a sweep profile where he doubles his attacks, so he has 12 attacks with it, and it's going to be at strength 5, AP 1, damage 1. I tend to find the sweep profile is a little underwhelming. I don't like it that much. I have used it, but I generally don't enjoy it that much. This guy is perfect for a relic called the Eagle Eye. And we're going to go all through the relics later as well, but I'm just giving you a little bit of a preview of how they work. What this Eagle Eye does is it gives him +1 to wounds. So he takes him to 8 wounds. And you can 1 phase per game give him a 3 up invul. This guy actually deserves a video in his own right, and I'm going to make that video in its own right, but I just need to really explain to you why this guy is so freaking amazing. After all those rules, he has more. He has a 6-inch heroic intervention, and he doesn't have to end engagement. He doesn't have to end his movement closer to the closest enemy model as long as he ends within range of a character. That means he has a very flexible, super heroic intervention, which makes him very devastatingly fast. You can load this guy up with warlord traits. You can give him that 5-up feel no pain if you want. You can give him the ability to reroll hit rolls. You can give him the ability to cause mortal wounds on 6s to wound. He is just so shockingly good. When I stack him into Shadow Keepers, he will also make everyone -1 to attack. And, I'm not going to get ahead of myself. Suffice to say, I've got another video on this guy specifically coming out. He's the best trading piece in the entire game, Warhammer 40k. He's incredible. So let's talk about the Vexillus now. We're out of HQs. This is a elite character choice. And remember, in Arcs of Omen, now your elite characters don't take up they have their own dedicated slots. So it's not a tax to take them anymore. So the Vexillus. You can take them vanilla or in Terminator armor. The Terminator armor just gives them +1 wound and an extra attack. There are 3 different banners you can choose from these guys. One provides a 6-inch bubble of light cover, 1 of dense cover, and 1 of +1 attack. And this goes to all shield host core or characters. Well, the really cool thing about this, and this is another thing that I tend to argue with people about, I love the light cover banner. Some people like the dense cover banner, which I don't think is wrong. The dense cover banner is great because providing a -1 to hit aura is really, really nice. But when you have this banner, what you can do is you can put light cover on a Dreadnought, or you can put light cover on the bikes, which typically can't get light cover, but they can naturally get dense. So if you have a unit of bikes sitting inside a forest, they'll be -1 to hit, and you have this banner, they'll also be +1 armor, which is really important because that takes bikes from a 2-up armor save to a 1-up armor save, which means all of the AP2 in the game, they still get a 3-up armor against, not a 4-up, and that is a huge difference in their survivability. So I love the light cover Vexillus. Some people like the dense, and I'm not saying it's a bad choice. It's just I don't think it's quite as good. The +1 attack is awesome, but I'm not sure how to use it. It's just it's tough to use. Maybe in the new Solar Watch meta where people are taking word and spam, maybe then you could work in the +1 attack banner, but it's tough. So then we have a few other HQs that I'll just mention, but I don't really think that they just don't have that much going for them. So for Sisters of Silence, you have the Knight Centura. And this girl is pretty cool. She's very cheap. She's only 50 points. And they do have some interesting warlord traits. So like one of the warlord traits is they can turn OBSEC off from an enemy unit, which is pretty dang cool. But they don't do very much. They don't give you rerolls. They don't really hit very hard. They're not very survivable. I think the only reason why you would really want to take a Knight Centura for the Sisters of Silence is for a cheap backfield objective holder, and I think we have better options for that. So I think they're generally a miss, but that doesn't mean they're unusable. Then we have Valerian, who's a special named shield captain for the Adeptus Custodes. He's got some cool functions. He's a little expensive, I think. He does have permanent transhuman, and his axe will allow you to ignore phase caps, which is cool. I haven't found a use for him. I don't think there's really much place for him. I know some people use him for good effect. He's hardly game changing. He's one model that can ignore phase caps with a damage 2 or damage 3 axe, and it's nothing special. You have the shield captain on foot. So we talked about a shield captain on bike, a shield captain in Terminator armor, and a shield captain on foot. there's just no point in the shield kept on foot because you're going to take Trajan Valorous, and if you have Trajan, you don't need the shield kept on foot. So it's not that the shield kept on foot sucks or anything. It's just that he's so overshadowed by other options that there's not that much to talk about as far as he's concerned. Then there's a special character for the Knight Centura. Her name is Alea. She's not really any better than the normal Social Science models or characters. So let's talk about some relics, some warlord traits, some combos. All right, these are the big relics we were talking about. The Praetorian Plate. This is the thing that gives a heroic intervention teleport, and you're almost always going to be putting this on your shield captain in Terminator armor, and it is awesome. You can stack that with your -1 to be hit, with your 5-up Feel No Pain. You can stack that with a bunch of the warlord traits, but this is an awesome relic, and it's absolute A tier. Then we have the Eagle's Eye. This is one that I think people overlook. +1 to wound, 1 phase per game, give them a 3-up invuln before a save roll is rolled. So what that means is if you guys are doing, I mean technically. So basically what that means is you can take him, say he's got 8 wounds, and then a unit of knobs comes in, and they deal 6 wounds to him, and you're like, oh, okay, cool. Well, then I don't need to waste my 3-up because I've already survived. Because you do it before you roll a save. You don't have to do it at the beginning of the combat phase or the beginning of the fight phase, right? That makes it really important so it doesn't have to be wasted. If someone's coming in and they're about to do a maximum of 10 damage to you, and you're like, I don't really want to gamble and maybe lose my 3-up invuln if I think I'm going to survive anyway. Well, you could roll 7 of the saves first to make sure that you're going to live, and then activate it if you're not. That makes it very easy to save your Eagle Eye, your 3-up invuln for a phase that's really important in. It also makes your Blade Champion, because I think this is the Blade Champion is the person you put this on, makes him very, very tanky. Because you use 1 CP stratagem to make him transhuman, you use 1 CP stratagem to turn off all rerolls against him. So then he's transhuman, he's transhuman, you can't reroll. He's got a 2-up armor save and a 3-up invuln. It becomes very, very unlikely for anyone to ever kill this guy. So I love the Eagle Eye. Then we have the Castellan's Mark. This is a guaranteed, it will be in your army. If it's not, then you are trolling. The Castellan's Mark is 2 redeploys after determining who goes first. For Custodes, this is so important because this allows us to deploy hyper aggressively with 2 really important units. And if we go second, we just pick them up and put them behind cover. So critical. It also allows us to defend very defensively. And then we go first. Then we'll just fix that real quick and deploy really aggressively. So the Castellan's Mark is a must-have. It's so powerful. Fulminaris Aggressor. This was a lot more important back in Nephilim when Armor of Contempt was a thing. I don't think you're going to see it anymore. It's kind of cool. It's a banner that can be given to like the Vexless we were talking about. And it'll remove light and heavy cover from enemy units that you're shooting with models who are within 6 inches of your banner. So it's kind of cute. It can maybe be useful, but I don't think it's useful anymore now that AOC is no longer a thing. Then the Auric Arquillus. I do not take this relic, but it's awesome, and I understand why some people do. First off, it allows you to reroll charge rolls. And second off, in the movement phase, you can choose to just double your movement, but then you cannot shoot or charge. What this does is it essentially gives Shield Captain on Dawn Eagle Jetbike a 40-inch movement, which is pretty useful sometimes. It can be very, very important. I don't particularly value it in my army, but I understand why people do value it. So those are some awesome relics. Let's talk about our warlord traits. People tell me that they think the Custodes warlord traits are not very good. I disagree with these people. So the Master of Martial Strategy and the Champion of the Imperium. These are the 2 warlord traits that you'll never choose because they're going on Trajan, because those are the warlord traits he comes with. It's a 5 CP regen, and you get to reorder the Katahs, and then it also gives you a 6-inch heroic intervention and reroll hit rolls. So Trajan has those, they're out. So then we really have 4 warlord traits as Adeptus Custodes to choose from. The first of which is Superior Creation. This is the 5-up Feel No Pain. 5-up Feel No Pain on a 9 wound, toughness 6, 2-up armor, 4-up invuln character in the Dawn Eagle on Jetbike character. Holy crap. It makes him a brick house, and it makes him very difficult to deal with. I love this warlord trait. It's going to be taken every single game. Then we have the Impregnable Mind. This warlord trait is awesome. I do struggle to fit it into my army sometimes. It gives you a Deny the Witch at +1 every turn. So you can put this on a character, say it's on one of your banner characters or something, someone who's giving you just a bunch of light cover. Well, suddenly he's also providing you with a decent amount of psychic defense. And remember, Custodes already all have a 6-up Feel No Pain against mortal wounds specifically, so they already have a tiny bit of defense built in. But Having a bonus deny at +1 can be really, really useful. In addition to this, that model will count as 2 extra models, which means they will count as 4 models for holding objectives. So one character can count as 4 models, which is really, really nice, especially if you also have a model who has OBSEC on that objective. It can make it really hard to lose models. Like I'm telling you, Custodes are good at holding objectives. Radiant Mantle is -1 to hit this warlord. The reason why I really, really like Radiant Mantle, and some people don't like it, is units that ignore cover still suffer this -1 penalty because it's not cover. It's just -1 to hit. So even if it's like, oh, the enemy doesn't get to benefit from dense cover, or doesn't get to benefit from cover at all, doesn't matter. You're still -1 to hit. You have to ignore modifiers to be able to ignore this. It makes that Bite Captain, when you stack this with the 5-up Fiona Pain, very tough to bring down. And my Bite Captain, man, he's just survived things that you would never think that he would survive due to these warlord traits. Then we have the Peerless Warrior. This is an okay warlord trait. Some people like it. I don't really take it. It means that if you cause a wound roll on a 6, you deal a mortal wound. And the enemy may never re-roll saving throws, which I find very useless because enemies are only ever going to be able to re-roll 1 saving throw using a CP command phase re-roll or a command point re-roll. That's just not going to come up very much. So I don't really see the point of that warlord trait, personally. So here's the combos. And this is important to keep in mind, is that the true combos come from the specific shield host, whether you're, and we'll get to the shield host in the next video. So these are the notable combos: Radiant Mantle or Impregnable Mind with the Superior Creation of Bike Captain, who's going to take the Redeploy Relic or the Double Move Bike. So this guy is going to be denying, or he's just going to be impossible to kill, and he's going to be redeploying your entire army. So good. Then you're going to take the Terminator Captain with the Praetorian Plate. That's the teleport. That's the teleport relic that lets him teleport anywhere on the battlefield into combat, plus Superior Creation or Radiant Mantle, which means he's going to be tough as hell to kill. So he's going to teleport in, he's not going to die, and he's going to smack someone. Then you got the Blade Champ. I normally don't put warlord traits on my Blade Champ. I actually use the Shield Host specific warlord trait for him, which we'll be talking about quite soon. And then the Fulminaris on the Vexless Praetor, which I don't really see. Sometimes people will put the Castellan's Mark, which is the redeploy relic, on the banner. I've done that. That works quite well also. So those are the notable combos for relics and warlord traits. Let's talk about the stratagems, and then we're going to take a pause, and we'll see you right back in chapter 2, in part 2 of this deep dive. So these are the stratagems. These are not all the stratagems. These are just the ones that matter that you will always be using. So Emperor's Auspice is no rerolls for 1 CP. Oh my gosh, this will be spammed. This will be spammed. It is so critical to be able to turn off rerolls. And it's only 1 CP. You're going to stack this with Arcane Genetic Alchemy, which might as well be Transhuman. So every single turn, you're going to have your Death Brick that you don't want to die. They're Transhuman, and the enemy can't reroll hits, wound rolls, or damage. This cuts the damage they're going to receive down by so freaking much. It is silly what Custodes can survive when you put all these buffs on it. And since it's only 1 CP, and you're regenerating 1 CP a turn anyway, man, Custodes are hard to kill, people. Eternal Penitent. You'll generally put this on one of your Dreadnoughts, so it's going to give them an extra attack and reroll charges, which is really nice on Dreadnoughts. Then Fraternity of Heroes. I think this might be the best stratagem that we actually have as Custodes. So what's going to happen here is you're going to get you're going to gain a 3-inch heroic intervention. And this goes on anything in the freaking army. Anything, except for, I think, the tanks. But Dreadnoughts, yep, 3-inch heroic intervention. Normal Custodian Guard, 3-inch heroic intervention. If you already have a heroic intervention, so say you're a character for 1 CP, suddenly it's a 6-inch heroic intervention. Here's a little trick. If you're the Aquilin Shield Host, which we'll go through Shield Host in just a moment. If you're the Aquilin Shield Host, everything in the army already has a 3-inch heroic intervention, which means for 1 CP using Fraternity of Heroes, everything in the army will get a 6-inch heroic intervention. The army is impossible to move block. Impossible to move block. A Dreadnought with a 6-inch heroic intervention is absolutely terrifying. This stratagem is incredible, guys. Don't forget it, and it's only 1 CP. Martial Discretion. The designated unit will receive benefits from both stances of the active Katah. This is a really cool way to get the same benefit from a Katah 2 turns in a row. So let's say that you're in Katahs and you turned off all rerolls to hit, and you really want it next turn as well, well, you can use the CP to get them have both chances of it next turn, which is really powerful. Then the Tanglefoot Grenade. This is probably like the signature stratagem that people know about Custodes. It's a little trickier than most people think it is. This can be used in the enemy's charge or movement phase. The movement phase is actually, it can be used. You have to be 12 inches within 12 inches of a Adeptus Custodes infantry, which means Sisters of Silence cannot use it. If the infantry unit can see you and is within 12 inches, they can throw the Tanglefoot Grenade, which will subtract d6 inches from your movement if it's the movement phase, or your charge if it's the charge phase. This does not affect flyers. The trick with this grenade, because I've ruined a lot of charges with this grenade, the trick here is this must be done if it's being used in the charge phase at the beginning of the charge phase, before the enemy declares the charges. So sometimes Custodes players haven't quite read that part and they didn't realize, so they think that it's reactive. So once you declare this particular charge, it's like, okay, well, I'll throw the grenade. No. They have to do it at the beginning of the charge phase before you declare charges. And if you're a Custodes player, it's really important that you understand that so that we're doing this correct. And if you're not a Custodes player, you need to understand that so you make sure that your Custodes opponent does this correct. Okay. Next part of the stratagems. Indomitable Guardians. The Indomitable Guardians. If you're on an objective, a Adeptus Custodes unit will fight next. Essentially, this is a 1 CP counteroffensive or interrupt. That's cool, because normally interrupts cost 2 CP. This costs 1, and you can interrupt. Also, it's a separate stratagem, so this means that you can interrupt twice with the Adeptus Custodes. Stack that with a few other things. For example, the Blade Champion always fights first, and Trajan Valorous can interrupt for free. Conceivably, you can get 4 interrupts. Custodes dominate the combat phase with their ability to interrupt everywhere all the time. Slayer of Nightmares, this can become really important if the target has a higher toughness than this Adeptus Custodes unit. The Adeptus Custodes unit is going to be +1 to wound. This can be used on characters, this can be used on troops. So this is when they send in the Custodian Guard against a greater demon, and their strength is going to say they have strength 7, you're like, okay, I'm wounding you on 5s. Actually, I'll spend 1 CP and now I'm wounding you on 4s. Very, very important, very, very cool. Maneuver and Fire. Fall back and shoot with units who have fly. Very, very powerful for their tanks and for their bikes. Desperation's Price, 1 CP, force a Psyker who just takes perils to take another perils. Essentially, if you're within 18 inches of the Sisters of Silence, this is within 18 inches of Sisters of Silence, they can make you double perils. Really sucks. Empiric Severance is a 1 CP 4-up deny if you're within 18 inches of the Sisters of Silence, so they can shut down psychic phases, they can shut down psychic secondaries. Very nice. And then Victor of the Blood Games. This is the 1 CP stratagem to give a second Warlord trait to your character. So I think I'm going to go ahead and pause right here. So this is going to be the end of part 1. Part 2, make sure you tune in because I'm going to go through the individual shield hosts, and then I'm actually going to walk you through the critical units for the Custodes, and then we'll talk all about how to actually play against the Custodes and how the Custodes should be playing on the battlefield. This has been awesome. Thanks so much for your attention, and I will see you in the next video when we go through the second part of the Adeptus Custodes Tactical Deep Dive. Y'all are amazing. If you wouldn't mind just hitting me a subscribe, like button, and typing questions in the comment chat, in the comments, and I will absolutely get back to you. All right, everyone. We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.